Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. Craig Hoffman here, Logan Paulson there. We will be at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor on Sunday to preview this game for 3 hours. We'll also keep you updated on all things going on around the league in the 1 o'clock window as well. So you can come hang out with us, Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor, for the Take Command pregame show. And of course, you can listen all 3 hours on 106.7 The Fan, the Team 980. Watch it on YouTube. So we just talked about the pass protection, Logan. How does it hold up against this Seattle defense? We're going to find out. They've got a lot of talent. What do you see when you watch them on tape?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of defensive front, we can start there because we're just talking about the offensive line. Boye Mafe, the second-round pick last year out of Minnesota, has been kind of their guy. He's had a sack in the last 6 games, which is a pretty cool record, I think, that shows a little bit of consistency. He probably should have had a couple more against Baltimore, but Lamar Jackson did Lamar Jackson stuff and got out of some stuff. He's kind of their guy. I think the other guys on that defensive line are fine, but there's nobody that jumps out to you as being dominant. I think, what's the other defensive end's name? If you could look that up, I got it right here on my phone. But they're talented athletes that I think are dynamic in terms of pass rush, but they haven't been that productive, and I think there's some issues there.
Talking about Darrell Taylor.
Darrell Taylor, thank you. And so I think that's one of the reasons you go out and you trade for Leonard Williams, is to add a little bit of juice to your pass rush. So when you look at how they've got it listed on the depth chart, how they played last week, they've got Boye Mafe on the offensive left, and they've got Leonard Williams, who plays basically in this 3-4 structure they run. He plays the right defensive end. So like Chris Paul and Charles Leno going to have to earn your paycheck this week. And, obviously Taylor, I think, is the other guy on the other side, is a good athlete and a good pass rusher. Remember, I kind of made that distinction. We were talking about Montez and Chase a couple weeks ago. He's not the best defensive end, but he's a good pass rusher. And they've got a couple guys like that with some decent pass rush juice. It's just about, can they turn that juice into production consistently? So it's a group that I feel very comfortable with. Maffe's the guy that's been very consistent for them, so you got to kind of star him. Leonard Williams, obviously a good football player, but it's not overly dynamic. They're good. It's a good D-line, but it's not amazing. I think the thing that really, where they get a lot of miles out of, is they do a really good job with their 5-man pressures. And they don't do them all the time. They kind of run this Seattle cover 3, cover 2. They play a little bit of man. That's kind of been an evolution of the system up there, but a pretty conservative coverage structure. And they are pretty selective about when they bring 5-man pressure. So they're bringing a nickel. Jamal Adams is a guy they blitz quite a bit. They bring a linebacker occasionally, but they do a really, really good job about turning those 5-man pressures into actual pressures and sacks. And I went and watched all of their takeaway cut-ups yesterday. So they have 14 takeaways. I think they're 10th in the NFL in takeaways, or 9th in the NFL in takeaways. So they do turn the football over quite a bit. And what you find is a lot of those come off of those 5-man pressures. They just run them really, really effectively. And it's not like they're doing anything crazy. You can just tell they have a very simple defense, very straightforward defense. And one of the things that allows you to do is be really, really good at what you do. And that's what they are. They're really good in those 5-man pressure situations about, hey, I'm not rushing this guy right down the middle. I'm attacking his inside shoulder. So the guard can't push through to this blitzer. The blitzer's going to be free to the quarterback. The quarterback, makes an errant throw, they get an interception. Because in the back end, Tyreek Woolen's not playing as well as he was last year, but still a dynamic football player, converted receiver, can catch the football. Obviously, the kid from Illinois, his name is
Devin Witherspoon.
Witherspoon is balling right now. Trey Brown, I think, is the other corner. He's got 2 interceptions. He's doing a great job. So they do have guys in the back end that can hurt you. So I think it's just about, and they've been very effective as a defense outside of the Baltimore game, which I think is probably more on the offense. If I were going to assign any kind of blame here, I think the offense turned the ball over 4 times, 2 interceptions, 2 fumbles, if I remember correctly. But they've been very consistent. So I think this defense, while simple, is pretty good, and they're well coached, and that's something that they weren't last year. And I think that's a nice thing to see up in Seattle, kind of hearkening back to what they were, when I was playing, kind of the Legion of Boom type stuff. So.
Yeah, obviously some of the simpler coverage structures Sam has done better against this year. We can talk about that in a second. I just had a flashback, though, when you said Jamal Adams' name, and I was like, oh, God, that's right, he's there. The last time Washington played Jamal Adams was 2019, and he was a terror.
Like, was he?
Three sacks, 3 tackles for loss. Like, he was everywhere. It was one of his last games with the Jets, I think, before he got traded. But yeah, oh my God, peak Jamal Adams was something else. There's a reason Seattle traded 2 first-round picks for him. Hasn't really worked out for them.
That's crazy
because obviously he's been hurt a ton, but back healthy, and he's not what he used to be, but still a good football player. Condra Diggs is also very good. So they've got a ton of talent in that back end, which is obviously scary. Like, to me, the thing that I look at their depth chart and I'm like, God, they got speed everywhere.
Yeah.
We'll see if Jordan Brooks plays at inside linebacker. He's banged up, but if not, like,
he's been good
they got Devin Bush behind him. Like, and again, like, Devin Bush hasn't been what I think he was expected to be coming out in the draft. Otherwise, he'd still be, what was it, Pittsburgh where he started. And would, everyone's like, oh my God, he's gonna be the next great Steelers linebacker, and he's not. But like, the team speed they have is, I think, going to be interesting to watch that matchup, and watching can Sam adjust to from a New England team that lacked that. It didn't have like the most,
that's a great point.
Insane athletes all over the field, to a team that's plays pretty simple structures, but it's going to have guys everywhere.
And what you see is with that team speed that you're alluding to is that the windows, even though you can kind of identify those coverage structures, excuse me, is there's small windows because guys are ripping in the football. And I think, and they do enough variation. They play enough cover 3, they mix in enough cover 2, they mix in enough man, where if you're not really dotting your I's and crossing your T's, you'll throw them the ball because you think it's a different coverage than it is, and you'll get an interception. And it's not like they don't live in that the same way that New England does, with regards to like, hey, we're trying to be varied. We're trying to be, this exotic coverage structure, exotic blitzes. They don't do that, but it's just kind of enough of a changeup, kind of like we were talking about with the pass rush stuff earlier. It's enough of a changeup that it keeps you on your toes offensively. So I think this is going to be a really interesting matchup. I think Sam should do fine with it. I think the offense should do fine with it in general, but I think the thing that you kind of circle with a red pen is like, how do these corners match up with our receivers and our playmakers? Because like you said, they are pretty dynamic playmakers. And like I said, Tyreek is not playing as well as he was last year, but he still he's 6'4" and he runs a 4.3 40, and it shows up on film, and he's kind of all over the field in that regard. So, can you take advantage of that? Can you take advantage of of Trey Brown? And a lot of teams have tried, but have not been very successful. So outside of Baltimore, where they absolutely took him behind the woodshed, but that was more of them running the football. And that was kind of their Achilles heel last year, was they were bad against the run. And prior to the Baltimore game, they were pretty good. They were a pretty good defense, like a top 12 defense. So I think it'll be a very, very interesting challenge, very unique in terms of what they're going to be seeing from an athlete standpoint, for sure.
So we play predict a game plan here. Put you as EB. How do you attack them? Do you try to repeat some of what Baltimore did and run it, or you just go like, that's what Baltimore does, it's not what we do? We gotta try to find ways to create good matchups, give Sam easy looks, and get the ball out of his hands.
Yeah, I think that's what you have to do. And it's crazy because when you look at, like, they played Cincinnati, and I know Joe Burrow wasn't right, but I think that game was 17-13. Cincinnati won, but it was kind of a slugfest. They've held a lot of teams to not a lot of points. Arizona to 10. They had another game in there where it was 13, like very low scoring affairs. And the offense for Seattle has been turning the football over quite a bit. So I think this is a good defense. It's just about kind of finding what you're looking for. And I think I would I don't want to say cut and reuse what I used against Philly, but it's going to be very similar to that. You're going to kind of know what they're in. Can you take advantage of it? Can you throw the quick game? Can you throw the screens? Can you get Sam settled in? Can you get the crowd to quiet down a little bit?
I want to talk about the crowd for sure in a second. Yeah,
that's going to be a huge thing for them. So if I'm doing a game plan, I say, what's been effective for them? It's been the quick game, screens, selective about your shot plays, and giving Sam some autonomy at the line of scrimmage. And I think that's what you're going to see. And I think Tyler Larson in this game has to be excellent because you're dealing with all this crowd noise. And like I said, they don't blitz a ton, but they're good at the 5-man pressures. So can we help Sam identify those 5-man pressures? Because we have 5 offensive linemen, we should be able to pick it up. Let's make sure we get them targeted correctly.
So that brings us to the crowd noise, because they've done a great job of giving Sam this autonomy at the line of scrimmage. He's able to do, hand signal this, but it's also yell that and rip,
Yeah.
Liz, whatever these line calls are week to week. And now you can't say anything because in Seattle, it is probably the loudest stadium in the NFL. It's just a cool design. This stadium, for those that don't know, is like a genuine feat of engineering. It's 50,000. It's not like it's 100,000 people in there like Dallas is or some of these other stadiums that are monstrous.
It's a cool stadium.
But it's 50,000, and the way they designed it is there's like overhangs over the stands on either side. It's open on one end where like the 12th man flag is. I think everyone's seen that. But the way the sound from the stands, like the angle of the actual stands were built at and where those awnings are over top, the sound bounces like this, and it all triangulates down onto the field. And so it's super loud, very specifically onto the field. And everybody in Seattle knows it, and they get really loud on third down, and they're smart fans. They get really loud when you're in the huddle. Like, I remember Cooley used to talk about this when I was working with him at 980 way back when. He's like, some fans are smart fans and some fans are dumb fans. And the dumb fans will let the play call happen in the huddle. And then as the team walks in the line of scrimmage, it's like, all right, get loud for your defense. And it's like, cool, we already did the communication part. Thanks for playing. Now you're just getting me like amped up for the play. Now, Seattle, it will be loud all the way through. You're going to have to yell in the huddle. You're going to have to be really, really crystal clear with your communication. Like Sam is going to be hoarse at the post-game press conference for sure. And the ability to make adjustments to the line of scrimmage, nevertheless, snap the football and have an actual snap count is going to be severely limited as long as this is a close game and the crowd's into it. So how do you combat that, especially with a young quarterback who has probably never faced something? I mean, Denver's crowd is pretty good, but I don't think he's faced something quite like this as a pro.
Yeah, he's played pretty big-time college football, so he's had some exposure to it, but obviously NFL
You play at Clemson, like it's loud as hell, but
loud.
It's different. It's different in college.
There's something about that stadium, man, and I think you alluded to it with the engineering, but like you'll be on the field. I'll be right next to the offensive lineman, and I cannot hear what he's saying. And I think that's something that it sounds crazy, but we're 2 feet from each other, and I have to like turn and look at him while he's making the call to make sure that I get the correct call. I understand where the run's going. It's not like usually you get to line of scrimmage and the center will be like, hey, we're going 51, and then I go, oh, okay, well, we're going to triple to 58 or whatever. But now I got to look, I got to physically see his point. And that's the other thing, like they shift around a lot. Not Seattle doesn't, but if they do move around a little bit, it affects the targets, it affects the runs. So it is going to be challenging. I remember we didn't do this in Seattle, but Kirk was always really good about getting in the huddle and like kneeling down and like sitting on his haunches kind of and like barking the play up into the huddle. And it really made it easier to hear it as opposed to a lot of quarterbacks who kind of stand in and then talk down. Because when I was, I forget where I was, but I actually had to, the quarterback wouldn't do that. I think it was Jay Cutler. And I actually had to like get on my hands and knees so I could see his mouth because he was just kind of talking to the ground. But those are the types of things that matter here, right? It seems ridiculous, but it's how, because so much of what you do offensively is communication. So can I get the play? Do I understand what I'm doing? And so for Sam to understand, like, how's he going to deliver the play in the huddle? How loud does he have to be? Does the offensive line, like, that was another thing Kirk was excellent at. He'd be in the huddle and be like, look at the offensive line, yell the 2-jet, yell the pass concept to the receiver, point to the Z if the Z was tagged. Like he was really good at doing that. And I think, and Matt Ryan was excellent at it too. And Deshaun Watson was excellent at it. Like the top flight quarterbacks that I played with were excellent at that stuff. And so for Sam, I haven't had to do that really. Can I learn how to do that? You mentioned Denver's a good stadium, but it's going to be different. Then at the line of scrimmage, that gets crazy. If you're not really dialed in, if your team isn't dialed in, that can be really, really challenging. And they've added a little bit more of that. And I think it's really helped them. So like, it's not just Sam, but it's the whole offense being aware of the situation. And I know this sounds like to a lot of people, like maybe it's overkill, but that's how you have to operate in these crazy loud environments. Like in the dome, when in Minnesota's new stadium, it gets loud like that. I have to really think about it. I have to look at the ball to get snapped. I have to kind of peripher the quarterback. If he comes to line of scrimmage, I have to get up and look at it. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that. And you have to signal the routes. Like you can't just spark them out anymore. You got to signal what you're doing. So it is a comprehensive thing. And I remember when I was in Atlanta, this is something we used to do. Matt Ryan used to whisper the play. We wouldn't have any crowd noise, but he'd get to line of scrimmage. He'd be like, all right. He'd be like, hey, twins right. and it was like, and you have to really, and he'd whisper his cadence and he'd whisper the check, and you had to just be really dialed in. And I think if you have a methodology for that in the week, it's very, very helpful. And so some teams will bring out the speakers, but the one thing I respect about Matt Ryan a lot is that he was thinking about it for every walkthrough. We would be in like sneakers in the gym, and he would be whispering his cadence. He'd be whispering the play so that we'd get used to not being able to hear it, and we'd have to develop our own way of hearing it. And I don't think Sam's going to do that because he's a young guy. But are the coaches going to help him kind of develop that process? Would be interesting.
Yeah, by the time this podcast comes out, it'll be a little later in the week, but we can cut up the clip and send it to EB and be like, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think about the whisper practice?
It was
okay.
I remember the first time we had an away game when I was in Atlanta, and I was like, he's like legit whispering the cadence. Like I can't, and I was like, this is really smart. But all the guys that had been there, it was like old hat. They had their way of like hearing it and stuff. So it was interesting.
Smart. It's really, really smart.
Very smart.
Why did Matt Ryan play 18 years and win an MVP and probably go into the Hall of Fame? That's why, because he thinks about the game in that level of detail. If you reread stories about like Peyton Manning, same type of stuff. Yeah. They always have a way. But I think it's just to kind of wrap up this point and wrap up the thoughts on the offense. Like, part of the success of the last couple of weeks is they've been in good looks, they've been in good plays, they've gotten themselves out of bad plays, and they've taken advantage of certain things where it's like, oh yeah, we got him. Okay, let's get into that play that, for this formation or this this coverage, this front, this alignment. And if you can't have that communication, you're stuck in bad plays, and that's obviously not a great way to operate offensively.